Karen demands a VIP table, claiming to know the owner. Little does she know, the real owner is serving her, setting her up for an epic $4,000 revenge that leaves her in tears. Screaming that she knows the owner, and that we should give her and her group of friends the VIP table meant for celebrities, Karen bursts into the restaurant. I chose to play along and see what occurred, even though I own the business and have no idea who this woman is. One of the girls questioned me throughout the dinner if I felt that my life was pointless because I was a server. I knew then that everything was up in the air and that I was going to get even. I did this. Around Christmas and New Year's, something happened. In the 1970s, my grandparents opened a restaurant after moving to Canada from Italy. After they passed away, my parents took over the restaurant, which they expanded throughout the years. I started working at the restaurant when I was 15 years old. My parents retired as they grew older and moved to Florida to spend the winters as snowbirds. In addition to their savings, they retained a small portion of the stock when they sold the restaurant to me a few years ago. I updated the old place as soon as I got ownership of it. I remodeled the eatery, changed the logo, and placed ads in regional and national publications. I invited bloggers, vloggers, and culinary critics. At first, it moved slowly, and I started to worry that I had damaged 3 generations of a family business with the debt I had taken out to do all of this. However, it quickly started to function. We were featured in a video by a local semi-YouTuber, which attracted more visitors and reviews. We were rapidly experiencing 5 to 10 times the typical amount of activity, even on a Monday. We developed into a venue for big parties, and on some evenings, it was not unusual for a famous person to drop by. I even asked some well-known customers to come and prepare meals for our visitors. Because this was so expensive, we were fully occupied over the holidays. In order to get a table in December, reservations had to be made in July. Years passed before we reached this point. I wasn't content to just sit in the back office when things became crazy. Whether it was greeting guests, bussing tables, or mopping the floors, I was on the floor doing whatever needed to be done. I took responsibility and wore a jacket on evenings when there were well-known people or activities. 6 women entered one night. The leader appeared to be in her mid-20s, while 5 of them seemed to be in their early 20s. My best guess was that she was either an older sorority sister to incoming college students or an older sister of one of the females. At the door, I was welcoming them, and as they got closer, Queen Bee Karen told the infant Karens that this restaurant is amazing, that the food is great, and that celebrities may even be present. She told me she needed a table for 6 when she came up to me. Of course, I replied. Can you provide me the reservation's name? She gazed at me. Oh, I didn't make one, but it's okay, she replied. I am personally friends with the owner. We can have one of those tables tonight, he continued, as he always has 1 or 2 reserved for special visitors. For several well-known eateries, this is accurate, and I have been doing it lately as well. However, this woman had never told me about any of this, and I had no idea who she was. She had picked the wrong person to try this with, but I could see her trying to enter without a reservation. I apologize, but we are unable to seat anyone without a reservation, I informed her. We don't have any seats available, as you can see. I'm the owner, and we have never spoken before, so I never promised you anything, was not the exact thing I wanted to say, but I also didn't want to make her look bad in front of the other girls she was seeing. She then gave one of the other girls instructions to snap a photo of me at that moment. By the end of the week, she said, she would talk to the owner and make sure I was either cleaning toilets or getting fired. She was joined by several girls behind her, who said things like, yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye. I wasn't certain whether they genuinely thought she knew the owner or whether they were plotting with her. Queen Bee. Then Karen remarked, look, I can make your life really hard, or you can give us a table. Losing your job is not worth this. In an attempt to minimize me, she continued to point before stating things like, obviously, you aren't anyone here, because if you were, you would know who I am and never try to tell me anything other than yes or, of course. She was trying to take that table and put me down all the time. I had 3 choices at the time because it had been a difficult day for me. I could call her out on everything and let her know that I am the owner. I could just give her the table and go on. Queen Bee Karen and her henchmen might learn a lesson from me. I went with option. Of course, ma'am, I answered with a smile. Follow me, please. I gave her one of the 3 tables we keep empty in case a famous person shows up, which happens sometimes. You're right, and I'm sorry for everything, I said to her. Just giving you the table would be easier. I also promised to give her free drinks for the first 3 rounds. I sat them down and served them myself. While they were sitting there, I said, we need one of your credit cards and IDs just to keep on file, and we'll return them to you before you leave. After giving me her card, Queen Karen told the infant Karen minions, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, gave them their complimentary drinks, and let them know that the meal would not be served right away because of how busy we were tonight. The free drinks were the primary concern of the women. After placing 3 orders, they still hadn't gotten any meals. Eventually, with the worst attitude they've had since they arrived, they called and asked me to check on it. I inquired if they wanted more drinks and said I would check into it. 2 more rounds were ordered. After spending much of the evening eating salads and drinking on an empty stomach, they were completely soaked by the time the appetizers arrived. More drinks were ordered as the food came in. These females were unaware that they were seated at our VIP table, which often cost several $1,000s, but I didn't bill them for it. I billed them for every incredibly expensive cocktail they drank during the evening, with the exception of the first 3 rounds. In addition, they were seated at a VIP table, as mentioned earlier. The menus were therefore varied. These menus don't show prices. This is a trade secret in the restaurant business. Higher-end menu items including black caviar dinners, white truffle, and specially imported West Coast oysters were also available. I honestly started to wonder what I was doing at one point during the night. These poor girls might not know any better, so I was afraid I was pushing them too far. Nevertheless, certain things gave me encouragement over the night, like when one of the baby Karens asked whether I felt my life was meaningless because all I ever become was a waitress. Additionally, one of the employees informed me that they were plotting methods to trick me because they thought they could do it at any time and that I would always provide them with a table. "He's cute, but I wouldn't date a waiter like that," I heard them say. "He is a complete pushover." I carried on with their life lesson because they kept making remarks like that throughout the evening. By night's end, each woman had accrued between $500 and $600 in bills. I presented the $423.23 bill, including tax and tip, to Queen Karen. I've never witnessed someone sober up so quickly. She went from laughing and smiling with her friends to practically crying. She called me over right away and inquired as to if this was a joke. After seeing the bill, I apologized and said, "I'll get you the correct bill amount." Once more, she called me an effing moron and seemed utterly relieved, as if she had received someone else's bill, before carrying on with her conversation with her friends. She freaked out once more when I came back to give her the correct bill. "Is there something wrong on this bill that you didn't order?" was all that was asked. Startled, she and the girls went over every line of the bill, including the first few paragraphs that said their first 3 rounds were free. After pulling out their phones, they went over everything 100 times and totaled it all. Surprised, Queen Bee just said, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." I was afraid she would eat and escape and leave the infant Karens with the tab, but I informed her in a tactful way that we had her credit card and ID, so it wasn't too clear that I was worried she would rush out. She came back 10 minutes later with fresh makeup, obviously in tears, and told me all about the awful meal, the terrible beverages, and so on. She insisted that I at least decrease the price in half. Even though she had already told the baby Karens that the night would be hers, she continued by saying that they would assist. And then, as though something had suddenly clicked in her mind, she mentioned her supposed connection to the owner once more, as though that would encourage me even more to cut the sum in half. "No, simply no." I told her with a smile, "I can't cut the bill." Then she pulled out her phone and showed me a string of text messages from someone who had my restaurant's name on it, followed by owner. I understood immediately what she had been doing in the restroom, perhaps deleting previous texts and altering the contact name of one of the other Karen subordinates to create this new script. After reading through the messages and selecting the contact details, I informed her, "That's not the owner's cell phone number." "He has multiple phones for business," she replied. "You obviously don't know all of his phone numbers." I said, "How about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it." I realized it was time to wrap this up when she started yelling and ranting, which caught the attention of the few customers who were still there. Less accommodatively, I told her, "Cut the shit, little daughter. The owner is unknown to you. You've never been here before, and I'll call the police if you keep yelling." She tried to explain herself as best she could, and her tone altered. "My grandfather founded this restaurant," I said in response to her flimsy answer. "This business has been operated by my family for many years. I've spent almost my whole life working here. I am the restaurant's only proprietor, and before now, I have never seen you, heard of you, or promised anything to a stranger I have never met." Little Karens were paralyzed, unsure of how to respond. Queen Bee was crying. I went on to say, "Now, I gave you the table you requested, one of these special tables for upscale customers, and I didn't charge you for it. I also gave you 3 rounds of complimentary drinks. I'll call the police and provide your ID to them if you fail to settle your account. Karen wept as she signed the bill, and the little Karens took out their wallets to give her the few $100s they had left, promising to pay her more. A furious man showed up at my restaurant 2 days later and asked to speak with one of my bartenders. He had to wait for roughly 30 minutes because I was busy in the back office. Even though she was with him, she kept her head down. Since the security cameras were in the VIP area, the audio quality was really good, so I brought them both to my office and showed him the highlights. Because of past unrelated situations, we had to maintain accurate records in that area. I showed him much of it, including their orders and comments. After everything was said and done, he hurried out with her while shouting at her. The original bill I handed them, excluding the $120 oysters, remains framed on my desk, but I haven't seen or spoken to any of them since. In addition, I did not lose as much money as you may think from the table and 3 rounds of drinks. Since I hadn't anticipated gaining anything in the first place, I didn't lose anything because the table was supposed to be empty anyhow. The price of the lunch and additional beverages more than made up for the first 3 rounds defeat. Am I the jerk now that you know everything? Aside from their attempt to use force to get a seat and avoid paying the bill, the Karen's outlook on the world was perhaps the most shocking aspect of their predicament. That one comment on the original posters, OP, lack of skill as a waiter, was particularly striking. When one of the infant Karens inquired if he felt his life was pointless because all he had become was a waitress, it appeared that OP was about to abandon his entire plan of retaliation. One of the most crazily entitled opinions we've ever seen on this channel must be that one. The fact that she truly perceives the world in this way is just sickening, even though it may not be as thrilling or crazy as some of the other stories. Regardless of the salary, there is nothing at all wrong with having a job. This happens a lot with jobs like janitors, and I hate it when people think they are better merely because they don't work in those jobs. The decision to work as a janitor is perfectly acceptable. I don't comprehend that way of thinking. However, in this case, she feels that way and wants to make fun of him for performing a challenging profession, like being a waiter, or at least that's what she thinks he's doing. Additionally, I'm glad this tale finished on a somewhat satisfying note, with the father trying to turn things around but being more angry with his daughter than the restaurant owner. The fact that the restaurant was documenting the people seated at that table was the only thing that alarmed me. If I knew my conversations were being recorded, I would probably stay away from a restaurant. In any case, I'm happy that the OP was successful. But tell me, if this had been your restaurant and these were your patrons, how would you have handled the situation? Did the OP act rudely, and if so, why? I appreciate you watching. Please hit the notification bell and subscribe if you haven't already in order to receive updates on more startling real-life stories that are happening in your area.